With Josh Heidegger live in Tel Aviv, and on hold, Josh, is very much the headline here.
This whole country right now, this whole region is on hold, Bill, because they are waiting. People are waiting to see what the Israeli Defense Force does in terms of a ground offensive into Gaza. We've known this was in the works now for days, more than a week, but they've been holding off for a whole variety of reasons. One of them is the humanitarian crisis that is escalating on the Gaza Strip. We could show you a live picture right now. This is the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt, and there is now another convoy of aid vehicles that is making its way into Gaza. One made its way yesterday. It was 20 vehicles. This one appears, from what we're seeing, to be around 17 vehicles. They're filled with food and water and medicine. There are millions of people, about 2 million people, who need this support. Their water was cut off. They're running out of fuel, and so this has been a major priority of international aid groups, the UN, the World Health Organization, to try to get help for the people in Gaza, many of whom have been displaced because Israel has urged them to move from the north, which is where the bulk of the attention will be once this ground offensive actually begins. And Israel says it's trying to minimize civilian casualties when it goes after Hamas infrastructure, because what it's trying to do is eliminate Hamas. But of course, there is a major issue when it comes to hostages who are still being held in Gaza. As it comes to Gaza, as it comes to the hostages, by the way, I will give you, we will tell you about what's going on right now in Israel. A lot of people taken hostage from kibbutzim, the small communities down south that were massacred and rampaged by Hamas militants. We could show you video when photographer Mike Thorne and I a couple days ago went down to one of those places, a place called Nir Oz. It has been just run over by militants. That was on October 7th. Many of the people were taken back over the border. And when we were there, we were looking at the rubble of one family's house, and there was a team of people who were in there picking through that rubble. And we asked them what they were doing. It turns out they are from an organization called Brothers and Sisters for Israel. And they were there grabbing whatever valuables they could grab that belonged to that family. That those victims' family members had asked them to go in there to a dangerous spot that's currently under an evacuation order to gather personal effects that were meaningful to the victims' extended family who live elsewhere. And so that's what they were doing. It turns out this organization is a sort of an organic grassroots organization that encompasses 50,000 volunteers who just in the past 2 weeks have come together for all kinds of ways. We could show you video. We just came back from what they describe as a logistics center. It's basically a giant parking lot. It's maybe the size of almost a city block in New York, and it is filled with stuff, with all kinds of material that people might need. Because another issue that's happening here is that people have been displaced from their homes. People have been evacuated from their homes in the north or in the south, and they are gathering all kinds of belongings that they might need. We spoke to organizers who were talking to us about just what kinds of things they have.
Receiving donations from all of civil society, going through them, from clothes, from nappies to baby chairs, to prams, to toys you can see around here, children's books, you name it, everything here, in order to help our civil society cope with this tragedy.
You have to understand, we're living in an existential threat all the time. We're surrounded by, most of the countries are enemies, and the crisis that we have in the international arena, you're aware of. So when something like that is a core, everything is less important. We want to be here. We want to be here forever. We want to support our people that suffer. Hundreds of thousands of families without home right now. Thousands of families that they don't know where their people are in Gaza right now. And more than 1,500 funerals. So it's not time to fight, right? It's time to be helpful and time to focus on what we need to do.
This organization has its roots in a lot of disagreement within Israel about the state of democracy and plans that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had to reform the judiciary. This made a lot of news over the last year or so. But this organization that was major in organizing protests against that totally pivoted on October 7th to pulling together and seeing what they could do to help the state of Israel, because everyone here now sees this as an existential threat to the future of their country. Bill and Shantae?
Yeah, the judicial controversy seems way in the back on the top shelf now, not on the bottom. Josh, you know, the conundrum and the complicated conundrum here really is on my mind. And what's your take on this? With all these hostages, with all the aid still going, and with rebuilding Israel itself, how much on hold could this siege be? And they're getting ready for it, but isn't it going to delay it as long as all this is happening?
Look, I mean, there's been reporting that over the last couple of days that tonight, meaning each night, would be the night, right? So it's really hard to know, Bill, what's going on. I think there's part of it is that there's a need for the element of surprise in Hamas. I mean, everyone knows this is going to happen, but when is really what Israel has going for it. They are in control of that decision. But separate from that, there's a lot of international pressure when it comes to the state of civilians in Gaza. There's a lot of pressure when it comes to the status of hostages. Somewhere between 212 and 312 hostages, confirmed 212, but 100 people are still unaccounted for. They could be hostages also. So, you know, and many of those, at least 10 of them, are Americans. And the United States, President Biden has been pressuring Israel to, you know, go slow, give them time to get the hostages out, and also when they do go in, to try to limit what they do so that they don't provoke Hezbollah, which is in charge of the West Bank, which is actually much more dangerous from a military perspective to Israel's ability to be here on this earth. So there are all these issues at play. There's a lot of pressure. At the end of the day, everybody seems to agree that Hamas needs to be targeted and even destroyed by Israel, but how and when and to what extent is still unclear.
Josh, I want to segue back to the first topic that you were talking about, the Brothers and Sisters of Israel and how they formed. I find it very interesting when you said how they are trying to help identify, dead or alive, the people who are missing. How tedious is that task for this group, the thousands who are trying to find these people who are missing?
Shantae, it's fascinating. So this organization has all kinds of tentacles. They're doing all kinds of things. There's one thing they're doing, led by a technology expert who was a professor in Seattle, who is Israeli and is working here. She has formed this group, and they're using artificial intelligence, AI, to mine through social media feeds in Gaza, you know, of Palestinians, and they're looking for images that correspond to images of people who are missing. And so when there's someone who's a hostage shows up in someone's Telegram post, which is a thing that is happening, they're able to match that with the face of a person that they've been looking for since October 7th, who's been missing and unaccounted for. You know, and there are only two options. Either that person is alive and is a hostage, or it's an image of that person's dead body somewhere. And they're able at least to answer the question of what happened to that person. And so that's why the numbers of hostages keep fluctuating over the last, you know, several days. They've actually gone up. They were 197 at first. Now it's up to 212. This isn't the government of Israel that's figuring this out. This is this grassroots volunteer group that has put a lot of really smart computer programmers to work who are volunteering their time, and they're getting this information. And then once they have this information, they're able to provide it to the state of Israel, to the IDF, to the authorities, who are then able to add that to the hostage count and then do whatever they have to do to try to get them back.
And
really
also giving answers to families.
Absolutely, and that's important too. But how interesting, Josh, and you know, one part of this, how interesting that in a program like this, we have time to talk about this and dive deeper into how things are really going there. So we really appreciate your reporting, Josh. See you a little later.